All right, we got the Chicago mayor in the building, everybody. Let me fix this camera real quick. All right, perfect. Hello, welcome. Welcome. You got a water if you want. I also have a bunch of sodas.
Oh no, I'm good with water. What is
You
this?
don't
Is
you
this
don't drink
tobacco? What is this?
Oh, that's Zins.
Zen-
I got a lot of stuff here.
Oh yeah, is that how you keep yourself focused?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
Exactly. All right. Well, a pleasure to have you. I've become a big fan of your city as of late. You were on the Jam Pod too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Love those guys.
They really are a great group of young brothers there doing
Yeah.
some great work, elevating the consciousness of America. So it's always dope to see the next generation of conscientious thinkers and influencers that understand the political moment that we're in.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got to duke it out in the marketplace. The mayor's mic is low. Hold on.
Yeah.
I thought no, it's just you gotta yell a little bit.
Just be a little louder. So,
Yeah, be a little bit louder.
Yeah.
You're used to it though. You go
Yeah,
out.
well, I was hoping to come. It's LA. I thought I was gonna come and chill a little bit. So I'll bring some of that Chicago energy. I got you.
Yeah. No, we don't chill out here. It's also colder in LA than usual. I feel like.
Burr.
Yeah.
Yeah, that very tough 60 degrees. That's
is-
always tough to withstand.
But-
Like you're in a full sweatsuit.
Yeah, I'm cold right now. This is I'm chilly. I'm chilly in the house. But for you, it's like this is t-shirt weather. I
Man,
assume.
this is comfortable, man. We could play a double header in baseball in weather like this.
Yeah. Brandon Johnson, everybody.
What's up, y'all?
Thank you so much for coming. Obviously, progressive mayors and socialist mayors are at the forefront of the conversation right now, all around the nation with Zohran Mamdani's victory. So I wanted to talk about the trials and tribulations of being a progressive mayor, especially in a city like Chicago. So we'll just dive right into that. You won after Lori Lightfoot. After a sequence of Chicago mayors that were establishment Democrats and ineffective for the most part, what have been some of the major hurdles that you had to overcome pushing an agenda that is more progressive than what most people would ever assume of a major city?
Well, first of all, it has been the joy of my life serving as mayor of one of the largest economies in the world. Having, started off my professional career as, someone who was involved in youth development and eventually became a public school teacher, organizer, and that led to sort of the political, aspirations that got us to this moment. I would just say that the big challenge for progressive leaders, progressive executives in particular, there aren't many examples and models. There's not a template, if you will, that we are afforded. It's like when I was a public school teacher, I had the veteran educators, so I wasn't necessarily creating lesson plans from scratch, right? Because there were those who had been there, done that. Some of the students, my colleagues, taught their parents and their aunts and uncles, right? So there's some familiarity there versus leading a major city like Chicago, where you had one family in particular that held the fifth floor for nearly 50 years combined, right? And so we're talking about several years, decades of sort of institutional complacency that blocked out, what's sensible about politics, which is ensuring that everyday people, working people had access. Right. So it was really just overcoming the fact that, one, there was no template, years of neglect. And then three, I was born into this work in the midst of crisis. And I'm happy to dig into that. But those have been three of the most, dynamic challenges that I've had to face as a progressive leader, particularly for a city like Chicago that hasn't had many examples.
What are some of the biggest setbacks, though, as far as like the alderman structure that exists? Like, I feel like there's a lot of power sharing that takes place. Like, because most people think like all mayoral structures is identical, and yet I feel like Chicago is a little bit more decentralized as far as like the power sharing goes, right? Would you say in comparison to like New York, for example?
Well, I think Chicago is unique in that the mayor, the executive, also presides over the legislative branch. Which that, don't get any ideas, you all. That's working for me. But I would say that the hurdles or just the element of governance, the challenges there really are more connected to the animus towards the value system that I bring. Like the structure in and of itself does have some degree of impediment, right? But our governmental structure is not necessarily, an idea that makes it impossible to lead. What I'm faced with right now is that the individuals that have had untethered access to the fifth floor now have to share it with working people.
Yeah. And they have been resistant.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
assume. What are some of the major battles that you've had to deal with as far as like advancing a more progressive agenda? Like, what were some of your goals in general? Because I know you tested out a pilot program for a pantry system, right, in the city. But what are what have been some of the major battles that you had to fight?
I mean, there's been a number of them, and let me just center it around what my ultimate vision for Chicago is. I'm working to build the safest, most affordable big city in America, right? I mean, you look at the other large cities, though that there's progress being made around safety. What good does it do to have a safe city, but working people cannot afford to live there? But vice versa, what's the point of having an affordable city if people don't feel safe? So everything that I've done has been centered around building safe and affordable communities. And those, battles have been everything from, me pushing for paid time off for workers, right? So we're the first big city in America to offer up 10 days of paid time off for over 1 million workers now benefit from that ordinance. We abolished the sub-minimum wage for tip workers. So tip workers will make the minimum wage that every other worker receives plus their tips. Those were some real major battles that I had to, overcome to get, our pro-worker agenda through. We've had some setbacks, right? I have this effort to increase the transaction tax on property that's worth more than $1 million.
Yeah.
But it required a ballot referendum. So we were able to pass it in city council to get it on the ballot, but we lost it at the ballot box during the election. I mean, it wasn't the best organizing operation that we have put together in the past. However, that would have raised $100 million to address homelessness, right? So that was a setback for us. But overall, my desire to build more affordable homes, invest in our young people, opening up and expanding mental health clinics and services. Again, happy to dig into all of that. But we've been able to accomplish a good part of what I campaign on. The challenge, of course, has been just fighting through the status quo of the political establishment that have not accepted the results of the last election, that the city of Chicago obviously wanted a working class individual who's tethered to public sector and public accommodations to run the city. So there's been a massive amount of money to interrupt and disrupt our overall agenda.
Yeah. Let me ask you this then. So you do come from an activist background.
Yes.
Right? And that obviously guides your worldview, that helps your understanding of working class background. What were some of the immediate reality checks that you got? As far as how you felt running for office versus how you govern. What was the biggest thing that you realized is wow, this is a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be?
I mean, honestly, it was the inheritance of the failures, right? I mean, I never looked at the job or even the task of the job to be insurmountable. Like the job is the job, right? You show up for it every single day with a clear vision and desire to bring change. You bring your skill sets, your information, your experiences. You bring people together. Like that in that aspect, that didn't necessarily overwhelm me. There were some challenges, I think, in the immediate, pulling the movement into the workspace that had historically been left out, where the fifth floor had been the target for all of these years, now changing the paradigm where the fifth floor is not necessarily the target, but it's the area, of course, that we want to be held accountable. But now the people who have been, pushing the fifth floor, the fifth floor is synonymous or is more symbolic for the office of the mayor. That's how we describe it in Chicago, because it's obviously on the fifth floor. But
What does it refer to?
We just say the fifth floor. We say the mayor's office, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess the larger point is there was a challenge of getting the movement to relate to government not as an opposition, but as a co-equal in terms of how we distribute services for people. And so the big hurdle was, one, getting over that mindset, but two is that, look, we're talking about years and years where the pensions weren't paid, right? Where schools had not been invested in. So it was really just overcoming the paradigm that had been established and then beginning to move our city in the direction of support, love, and care, right? And that's still an ongoing challenge, right? Because again, we're talking about people, right? And so whenever you're dealing with people, you're going to be confronted with just certain idioms that you're going to have to work through.
Yeah. So, all right, let's hone in on some of these areas of pressure. The way I see it from the outside looking in, I feel like there are, it's going to be somewhat reductive, but there are like multiple forces at play that are constantly going to be a thorn on your side. You have the big business interests on the one side, and we can break that down into different industries as well, or different sectors as well, like real estate, like private schooling is another one. You have police as an institution that is always going to apply pressure. There is this balance that you have to strike when you're the mayor, because like on the outside, you can lead Black Lives Matter protests, but when you're the mayor, you reside over. You have control over the police force as well. So then I feel like that creates a juxtaposition between like the same outside pressures that we were talking about that you want to represent, while simultaneously dealing with the people that are in charge. And then you have the press, local press as well. The local press has not been very kind to your mayoralty, I would say. I think like they are always going to be playing a role in undermining the goals that you're trying to accomplish for the most part. I don't know if you would say that's a fair assessment. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, one of the major newspapers, the day after I got elected, their headline was, Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson thanked everybody, including God, except for President Barack Obama. I mean, it was so random and disingenuous as well. Like from the very beginning, the corporate media has just been out to separate me from my base, but also to characterize my leadership and administration as some sort of fluke.
Why didn't you thank Barack Obama?
I mean, the speech was too long.
Okay. I always, every morning I wake up, I
And
thank
you
Barack
say
Obama.
Barack Obama for everything.
Barack Obama, thank you.
Yes, God is
Thank you
good.
for
God is
everything.
great. Thank you, Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Let's eat this food and
Yeah. So that's just between you and I.
Well,
like,
I'll
that's
work on that.
That's
now.
a difference for me.
Now I lay me down to sleep. I thank Barack Obama. Let my soul sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Listen, it's just a difference between you and I guess. But the media has not been so kind to me, even though I thank Barack Obama all the time. But I guess I'm forgetting other groups to thank. So that's one aspect. So you got the media. Let's talk about the trickier ones. The pervasive influence that certain sectors have over politics in virtually every major city and every town. The National Democratic Party, the Republican Party, real estate, the real estate lobby. How have they set up major hurdles against what you want to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a great perspective, that it's not necessarily unique to Chicago, right? This is a pervasive challenge that we have around the country.
Yeah.
I often think about the words of Justice Brandeis 100 years ago. He said that you can either have a democracy or wealth in the hands of the concentrated few, but you cannot have both, right? And we just saw the largest upward transfer of wealth under the Trump administration than we've ever seen in the history of America, right? So their influence, whether it's the real estate lobby and other corporate interests, they have worked overtime, quite frankly, to undermine my administration. In fact, the Bring Chicago Home ballot referendum, again, would have raised $100 million on property that was owned by people who the property was worth more than $1 million. So 97% of people who transfer their property would have seen a tax reduction. 3%, less than 3%, would have saw a nominal increase that would have addressed an issue that even corporate interests ostensibly want to address as well, right? And they spent 2-3 millions of dollars against that campaign to distort, right, the effort, and that was a difficult setback to have. I even with my last budget cycle, we challenge corporations to put more skin in the game to balance our budget so that we're not sticking it to working people. And we instituted some great corporate taxes. We have a brand new one, the first of its kind. It's called the Smart Tax. It's the social media amusement responsibility tax. So it's a tax on these large tech companies that have more than 100,000 followers. And essentially the revenue that we would generate from these big tech companies is going to go into our work to expand mental and behavioral health care services. But there was another one that we were pushing for called the corporate head tax. Essentially, it's a tax on big corporations that have more than a certain amount of employees. And again, it would have generated $100 million. And we're talking about 0.5% of the corporations.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a handful of corporations that would have generated revenue to address safety, which is the thing that corporate leaders say that they want big cities like Chicago to address. And they spent millions of dollars on ads to influence the city council to disrupt what essentially would have been 1.67% of our overall multi-billion-dollar budget. I mean, these individuals are so greedy in terms of their desire to capture wealth. It's beyond greed. It's avarice, right? Where they don't even want to leave crumbs behind for the rest of us, right? So there's been a concerted effort, not just through corporate media, but through, other social media means to disrupt and distort our vision. And then ultimately they've used their dollars and influence to dictate to elected leaders how they should vote, even though their constituency doesn't support the very thing that corporate interests are trying to promote and push through those elected leaders. So for instance, the corporate head tax, 80% of Chicagoans said that it was the right thing to do. And there were 30 alders who rejected it because of the influence from big money and corporations.
Do you ever feel the need to call them out by name? Like, by your assessment, is it appropriate to sometimes do away with that delicate balance?
Yeah.
And to just say, these guys are the ones who are, pardon my language, fucking up the bag for you guys. and just come out and outright apply pressure, like not shy away from using the people that brought you into this office, and maybe even using the organizations that have played a role in bringing you into power, and try to fight. I think you probably know why I'm asking this question, because there is another example here of a mayor that ran on this populist momentum, this populist wave against all odds, against the establishment Democrats and the Republican Party, and is now, I think, experiencing a little bit of that. Someone I know personally, Zohran Mamdani in New York. So I'm trying to figure out, like, from your lessons, like, how can we translate that to good governance, both in New York and in Chicago as well, that benefits the working class?
Yeah, no, I get what your motivation is there. And yes, I do believe that there are appropriate moments when you have to name people, right? And so during the budget battle, for instance, there's an individual who has given millions of dollars to a lot of different politicians. But of recent, it's been very clear that his efforts have been intentionally motivated to disrupt the movement that elected me. His name is Michael Sachs. He's spent hundreds of millions of dollars across the globe He is a strong contributor to AIPAC, for instance. And so this is an individual that has used his wealth and his influence to undermine the work that we're doing in Chicago. And there are others like him. I do know that people try to strike a balance because, look, there are different instances in which some of these individuals might be on the same page depending on the particular issue or conversation.
Yeah.
My experience has not been the case in this instance where, again, we had 2 administrations ago that, Michael Sachs had a lot of influence in that administration, and that administration closed schools. It shut
Whose
down.
administration was that?
That was Rahm Emanuel. Yeah, and so they
Well,
closed.
we're going to talk about Rahm in a second. We have to.
Okay, I mean, if you just insist, but you're
Oh, I insist.
okay. Well, then granted. But that administration shut down schools.
Yeah.
That administration closed mental health clinics. That administration pushed for privatization. We saw the force out of Black residents in many different parts of the city, particularly the west and south sides in particular, as it relates to that administration. And Michael Sachs is tethered to that administration. But we also saw, a boy who was brutalized and murdered by a police officer.
Yeah.
And that whole operation worked to cover up the actual murder.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, I do believe that this moment does call for a boldness, and we have to call out these actors and players who are contributing to the demise of society and their, efforts to do some goodwill in pockets. It does not cover for all of the damage and harm that they've caused.
Yeah. The reason why I said we got to talk about Rahm Emanuel is because obviously, a lot of your work goes into undoing many of the things that he did as the disgraced mayor of Chicago. And the reason why I'm bringing it up also is because he has ambitions of higher office, even though he was sent out in exile as a Japanese ambassadorship. He's back and he seemingly wants to run for president. What would you say about his mayoral reign in Chicago and what that spells for what he is planning on doing if he were to ever get a crumb of power within the Democratic Party?
Look, the Emanuel administration embodied the 1% of society. Everything that
He did that in the Obama administration as well.
Oh, absolutely. Look, and this might be a good time to just insert a thank you, Obama, if we're going to criticize him. So I don't know if this is a good time to pray, but I will say though, look, the 99%, if you will, that entire movement, there was no better sort of example of the stratification between the 1% and everybody else than the Emanuel administration. And he didn't apologize for it. He was very clear. He believed in, austere budgets. He did not believe in the public sector, which is an offense to someone like me, whose ancestors fought for public accommodations, right? You think about the demands of descendants of slaves, those of who escaped, of course, that brutal institution. Black folks in this country, after securing our liberation, fought for education, housing, healthcare, transportation, good paying jobs. I always add the friendly amendment, which is environmental justice. All the areas, of course, that Donald Trump is attacking and defunding. But that playbook was not introduced by Donald Trump.
Yep.
Right. That playbook was being moved by Democratic mayors across this country. And so you had a very strong privatization agenda that basically wanted to continue to curry favor with the ultra rich. And that has led to the dismantling of the very institutions that working people rely upon. And so, it was just met with his time was, I think, the sort of pinnacle, if you will, of that not just conservative, but that corporatized form of politics that had embedded its way into the mainstream fabric of the Democratic Party. And then that's what ultimately helped, accentuate my radicalization, if you will, as we saw these public institutions being defunded and disrupted, and how the Democratic Party was leading the charge across America of how to do just that. And, the Emanuel administration, again, took that effort and essentially place it on steroids.
Yeah.
And we're still living through the consequences of that.
What are some of the areas that you've had to basically play the role of cleanup job that were the most devastated after this corporate focus in governance?
I think the first area has been around our public education system, right? So democratizing the public education system. We're going to have a fully elected school board by this time next year. That's something that was unheard of. And so as a progressive leader, of course, I'm going to expand democracy. Is it messy? Yes. But I would much rather take my chances with an elected school board than mayoral control because of what that has meant for working people over the course of years. And so, just recently in my last budget, I released the largest amount of TIF dollars, which is a tax increment financing, dollars that are withheld from the public spaces, used, of course, to bring development, but that development never reached the very communities that it was designed to do. And so every year there's a surplus that previous administrations would just use as a slush fund. Well, I released $500 million into our public schools. So that's part of the cleanup. The Emanuel administration shut down mental health clinics. I've reopened 3 of them. And again, we've instituted this new tax, the social media amusement responsibility tax, to make sure that there's revenue for it. The Emanuel administration dismantled the Department of the Environment. I just want to let that breathe for a second. No pun intended.
Who cares about the environment? Come on.
You know what I'm saying?
We don't have to live on the same earth anyway. We can just go somewhere else if all else fails, right?
No matter how hard they try to figure out how to ship life or the Epstein files to Mars, in the meantime, we're right here on Earth, right? And so I reinstituted the Department of the Environment as another element to clean up. And then, quite frankly, how we generate revenue. So for a very long time, it's fines, fees, property taxes. My push has been that has left our budgets in turmoil. And so the best way to stabilize an economy is to have an equitable distribution of resources, but that also includes ensuring that the responsibility of how we generate revenue doesn't solely rest on the backs of working people.
I think there's one angle that we have to discuss here that I feel like is oftentimes not discussed enough, and that is people of color. Black people and brown people in general comprise a massive percentage of the entire state's students in Chicago, in the Chicago public school system. Mm-hmm. I believe it's 90%?
Exactly.
Yeah,
yep, between brown and black students. Yeah.
Right? And so when you're actually shutting off funds to the Chicago public school system, you're actually undermining the next generation of black and brown students in the entire state of Illinois. And the same goes for even environmental justice as well, especially because the most underserved neighborhoods are the ones that get impacted the most from a lack of environmental cleanup. So it's not just, I think, in my opinion at least, from where I'm standing, it's not just a war against the poor. It oftentimes has this racialized component as well. People that don't have the opportunity to speak back, people that don't have the opportunity to organize because they're too worried about making ends meet. You're black. As the mayor of Chicago, and Chicago's a very black city, do you feel as though there is also some racial justice that you've brought to the table in combating against these initiatives?
That absolutely, yes. In fact, I've been very clear about my agenda. When we talk about safe and affordable communities, we're talking about the communities that have historically been neglected. And for Chicago, that's the west and south sides of the city.
Yeah.
I live in Austin. It's a community on the west side of Chicago. It used to be the largest concentration of residents anywhere in the city, where we had 100,000 residents in the Austin community. It is still one of the largest neighborhoods. It is one of the largest concentration of black folks anywhere in the country. But that also means, though, that when we talk about harm and chaos, the Austin neighborhood, Roseland on the south side of Chicago, or Inglewood on the south side of Chicago, North Lawndale on the west side of Chicago, that's where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lived when he came to the city of Chicago. He lived on the west side. And we're talking about communities that have been just again, ignored for decades. And when I talk about safe and affordable communities, those are the communities that I'm referring to. We've seen what I call the Negro Removal Act in full effect by previous administrations, because they intentionally starved out these neighborhoods. Schools have been closed, the lack of jobs, the lack of regular, safe, affordable, reliable public transportation, the lack of health care, as well as child care being made available. And so I always talk about repopulating the city of Chicago, and that's where it has to start. And so I have this program, it's called the Missing Middle, and we fund it with a $1.25 billion bond. It's the largest investment bond for economic development and housing in the history of Chicago. And so, yes, I feel that responsibility that we put our money where our hearts and our desires are. And so we have, programs like, again, the Missing Middle, where we are creating owner-occupied living, where you can have the owner living on one level and they can rent out the other levels, right? So that allows us to, of course, expand our footprint in those communities, but it also ensures generational wealth. But it also ensures that the development that happens by people. That development is done by people who actually are indigenous to those communities. So yeah, that has been a concerted effort of mine. When we reopened the mental health clinic in Roseland, the community that I just named on the far south side of Chicago, people said, don't do it, folks won't come. Since we've reopened our mental health clinics, and it's been a year and a half, we've had 100,000 people utilize our mental health clinics, right? These were services that were paid for by the public for the public benefit, that corporate Democrats did not see the value in it. Right. And so I've been intentional about ensuring that the very people who have suffered the most as a result of corporate interests, that those are the neighborhoods that we have to start with.
Yeah. I went to the south side of Chicago for the first time ever with the Jam Pod Boys.
Yeah.
There was a block party that was taking place as a back to school fundraiser for, much needed school supplies for members of the community. And I'll admit that the attitude about the South Side is very different than the experiences that I had. Even when I was on my way over there, I had a Muslim Uber driver, I believe he was Palestinian, who said some very racialized things. He said like, "Oh, you should be afraid of seeing more than 3 or 4 black people around one another. Like you should, avoid." Like there was a really racist narrative around it, whereas the sense of community that I experienced when I went to this school drive, it was awesome. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, do you feel as though the bad rap that Southside gets is a hurdle in uplifting and developing these areas?
It has been. I mean, if I'm just going to be perfectly, honest,
because there's also the other side of it where I also kind of felt like, well, at least there's more home ownership here as well. Like there's a sense of community, so maybe it's not so bad. Because then otherwise, the inverse of that is basically gentrification and then pushing people out even further away from these areas.
You're absolutely right. It has been a hurdle, but that's why I said at the very top of our conversation, safe and affordable, right? So where communities have experienced stronger safety over time, it's come at the result of the push out of the very people who had been ignored, right? And so the best way in which we can secure communities is by investing in them. I felt safe in my home because my father had a job. I'm just going to be honest with you, that the security wasn't centered around whether or not your block is going to be robbed or there's going to be shootings in your block. The security comes from the investments. And so that's why, for instance, working to get over that hurdle, that's why I've been very intentional about investing in young people. So we have our summer hiring program where I hire thousands of young people. This past summer, we hired 31,119 young people for summer jobs. It's a over 50% increase since I've been in office. And where we have hired more young people, we've seen a precipitous decline in violence, right? And there's a direct correlation between, poverty and violence. You talked about this war on poor people. I've said this recently. The president of the United States of America has declared war on poor people. I remember once upon a time where we declared war on poverty. And we think about the three evils that Dr. King spoke of: militarism and poverty and racism. And so all of that you described is all intertwined in that drive over there. And yes, there's a real strong sense of community. Yes, there's a level of protection that and protectiveness that we have about our neighborhoods. And we're not oblivious to how poverty has beget crime. And that's why we've worked hard to address poverty, and not just simply addressing the crime that's happening on the surface. Reinvesting in our communities, or just investing in our communities, whether it's our schools, youth employment, mental health care services. I talked about the missing middle, the housing investments that we have. That's been the work that we've done. And as a result of that, we had the fewest amount of homicides in the city of Chicago in 60 years. Our reduction in violence was double the national average, because we've always said that it's not just policing alone. It's housing, it's education, it's healthcare, all of the things that we know that drive safe communities. That's what I've done as a progressive leader in what I believe is the best city in the world, Chi-Town.
So you're telling me that the alternative solution, which is to militarily occupy these neighborhoods and become the violence at the state level, is not the solution to crime reduction. It's actually solving the underlying problem in which crime manifests, which is poverty.
Absolutely. In the 90s, when I was in high school, Chicago suffered anywhere from 700 to 900 homicides, and we had 2,000, 2,500 more police officers, and you had more people incarcerated in the 90s, right? And we know the administration that was behind that, the Clinton administration. And so this addiction on jails and incarceration and the militarization of our cities, that has already been proven to be a failed strategy. That's why, as progressives, as those of us on the left, that we have to speak out against, the global militarization that's happening through endless wars, to the militarized forces that are occupying our city by the federal government and local policing. That, yes, of course, law enforcement plays a role, as you articulated earlier, but it's making sure that our detectives understand their assignment to solve crime. We had the highest clearance rate in 10 years. So we're holding people accountable that need to be held accountable, but we're making sure that we're addressing the root causes, which have proven to be effective thus far in our city.
Yeah, my attitude on this is that I've always said that the presence of police need to be the presence of law and order, and unfortunately, the way policing has worked, at least historically in the country, depending on which communities we're talking about, especially black and brown neighborhoods, the presence of police is lawlessness and disorder at times. So I think solving that is very important, because everybody wants there to be no crime. Mm-hmm. The idea that, it's an incredibly racist idea to assume that black and brown communities don't want law and order, and that it's supposed to be this chaotic environment. Unfortunately, that's, if you ask Fox News, that's what they say. What are some of the initiatives that you've taken on specifically in terms of redirecting the Chicago police that you consider to be success stories that led to the reduction?
Yeah. Okay.
Last question.
This is it, man. The time just flies. I will just say one of the first initiatives that we put together was revamping our detectives bureau. We had to make sure that law enforcement within the department, that they communicated with one another. So our detectives bureau and, our chief of patrol, counterintelligence, all working together. I have a superintendent who believes in constitutional policing, right? And so that includes like real legitimate training that has to take place. And so as a result of, these more, and then the last thing, how did I forget this? I'm embarrassed by this, that we also ensure that our police department built relationships with our CVI. That's our community violence intervention workers. These are individuals who have been justice involved. They've turned their lives around, and now they're working to bring wholeness to communities that they once terrorized. And so those have been the key initiatives, ensuring that our department our police department is communicating within the department and then working with CVI. To just give you a sense of that, the president of the United States of America cut $800 million out of violence prevention. Of those programs that were driving violence down, he cut the ATF budget. And so our police department worked with ATF to get illegal weapons off the streets of Chicago that are essentially being trafficked into our city from states that voted for Donald Trump, right? And so we've made these, adjustments to ensure that law enforcement could do its job effectively, but policing alone is not going to bring wholeness to our city. And that's why it's not just about driving violence down, which we have. It's about replacing the violence with the things that make communities whole. And that's been my approach from education, healthcare, housing, transportation, good paying jobs, all of that working together is how progressive leadership in this moment, calling on the ultra rich and these big corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. That's been the drive. That's been my motivation. And thus far, we're moving in the right direction.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, man. Thank you.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, everybody, thank you so much for coming and taking the time out to talk to us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Yeah, hopefully when I come to Chicago, I'm going to be speaking at Northwestern. I think maybe we'll be able to link up on your turf one time.
Yeah, we'd love to have that.
We'll go to the South Side.
West Side.
West Side.
I got you.
Sorry, West Side. You're right. All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Well, I'm gonna take a photo real quick, and here we'll get back to the security conference conversation right now.